Oh, I'm sorry, that he goes last. I have to introduce this wonderful new director of the Maine Jewish Museum, who is Dawn Larochelle. She's been with us a little over a month, and I'm telling you, the place has been gangbusters. She has so many ideas that this 84-year-old woman goes home, eats her dinner, sits in a chair, and is out for the night. Anyway, she's wonderful. We're happy to have her. And last but not least, I will introduce Ben Solotaire, who is the family representative of the children of Bob Solotaire. And he is going to say some words about his dad. He will be the first to speak.
Oh my God, such a burden. I just want to say, first of all, thank you. It's great to see everybody here. So heartwarming to see so many people show up for Dad so long after he passed away. But I know he was loved by all in Portland, or at least most. I'm sure there were a few might have had a few issues with, but also say thank you to the Maine Jewish Museum, Don and Nancy, for hosting this show of his. It's great to have so much work in one place. Over the years, we've been distributing and selling it and showing it a little bit here and there. But this is sort of a first major Maine retrospective or show of his work. My sister Lynn is here. My brother Matt couldn't make it today. We have other relatives too, but we'll meet them as we mingle later. I guess, yeah, how do I encompass my father in an opening statement? I was thinking about it, obviously, for quite a while, and I think there's one story of his that I think sort of encompasses a lot of what he was. I've lived, he was a New Yorker, obviously, and I moved back to New York in 1986. I lived mostly in Brooklyn since then. My family stayed up here. I was the only one that retreated back to the homeland. But we were there. I was there. It was 2001. And my father had a tendency to just show up at my door sometimes to come to paint. He would literally come down from Maine, either call me from Grand Central or ring the bell of my apartment and say, "Hey, I'm here for a few days." I'm like, "Great, come on up." So this was, as you might have guessed, right around September 11th. It was September, I think he came down on the 8th or so. And he was staying at my place, and I happened to be staying at a friend's house in Chinatown because I was actually in Queens then. I don't like to talk about being in Queens much, but for a few years I was in Queens, and but I was staying downtown about 20 blocks from the trade centers. And so September 11th came along, and we started off the day, and of course we all know what happened. And I reached out to my father. I called him at my house, and he wasn't there. And of course, his tendency was to get up in the morning and go wander the city. He would just go, either he had a destination sometimes, but if not, he would just go look for subject matter. So I had no idea where he was. And I couldn't, I was literally close to the site, so I didn't want to go anywhere. The city was locked down. I didn't know where he was till the end of the day. Made me a little nervous. But so I finally heard, he called me and he's like, "Oh, of course, I'm fine." He didn't phase it. He wasn't concerned, but he said he was having coffee at his favorite place. And the news came, in the morning, and the news came on that what had happened, and he immediately went to go give blood.
That sounds just like him, doesn't it?
Yeah, and he waited all day. It took hours, of course. That was the first impulse of a lot of people. But so he was there for hours, and he did that, and then he made his way. He took some photographs and things, and he made his way home. So that impetuousness of just showing up in New York to pursue some object to paint or new subject matter, as well as the humanitarian side of him to go do that as his first response. Yeah, it's a little touching. So, but he was, he was great. I think with the Portland Press Herald, when he died, the Portland Press Herald called, and I talked to a reporter. I said, "Dad was a very good father and an excellent painter." And I mean that sincerely. Of course, obviously, he was both, but it was his passion. It was his life. They'll talk about it too, but he did it every day. He did it. Went to the studio. He painted. He searched out new techniques. He looked at other art. He studied the world around him, and that's what he did. That was his life. So I will leave it at that. He taught us a lot, which I'll talk about it, I guess, at some point as we get through this, but he taught us a lot about enjoying life and respecting the world. So hopefully we'll see that in the art out there. Who's next?
Annette,
Is that me?
Annette Ulrich.
Hi. I have, okay. Like artists before and those who have come after him, Bob Solotaire loved the Maine landscape. He loved its cities and its countryside. He was a New Yorker, but came to love his adopted state, where he came to marry and raise a family.
A little louder.
A little louder.
Stand up.
You can't hear me. I should start again.
You can stand up.
Stand up.
I'm standing. I'm standing.
Go to the desk here.
I've never been. Like artists before and those who would come after him, Bob Solotaire loved the Maine landscape. He loved its cities and its countryside. He was a New Yorker, but came to love his adoptive state, where he came to marry and raise his family. Stephen that year was his brother-in-law and became Bob's mentor. In the mid-70s, when Rob and I opened Baradoff Galleries and Nancy Davidson worked for us for no money because we didn't have any, he represented Bob's work and sold an impressive number of his paintings. In those days, banks and other local businesses were eager to buy paintings to add to their sizable collections, Bob's and others. Bob and I loved running, and he and I covered many miles together, even managing interesting conversations all the while. Bob loved industrial scenes and bridges. He wasn't a photorealist, as one might think, especially some of the New York scenes. If you look up close, his own technique is visible. You can see the brush strokes, which are uniquely his. I'm so delighted that Bob's kids and Dana are here. This is very exciting. I'm thrilled beyond words. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. Dana, you have some words you'd like to share with us?
Yes, Bob and I met in a coffee shop. There were 3 people in the coffee shop, me, Ron Welton, and Bob. And I didn't know either of them, but as we got to know each other, I moved closer to them because they were fun. And one day Ron left early and Bob asked me out, and I thought, he seems like a nice guy. So I went. And boy, that was the best decision I ever made. The first date, we walked around Mackworth Island twice. We walked around Mackworth Island. Then we went and had a glass of wine at Joe's Boathouse. Then we went to the Pepper Club. It was like a 9-hour date. Then he was cool. He waited a few days to call me, maybe 4 or 5 days, so I'd be schooling. Then he called and said, "I know you like to go ballroom dancing. Why don't we go ballroom dancing next Wednesday at Maplewood?" And I thought, oh, Christ, what? He doesn't know how to dance. Well, he did, but we took a lesson. And halfway through the lesson, he said, "What do you think of this dancing?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure that's going to work, but I think I'm having a good time with you." So then we progressed from there. And so we met in 1997. In 1998, we went to Blue Hill, where we lived. I had a job up there for 6 months, and we lived in an old church that had been renovated to living quarters. So he could paint all day in the yard. He'd go to Blue Hill or around the area and paint. There's a painting here called Penobscot, the Church of Penobscot, that he did when we were up there. And it was a great experience. It was so much fun and beautiful change from Cortland. He left the West End and got away. Matthew ran the rooming house. People still stayed there. So let's see, we went to Bronxville once. He had a big show in the Bronxville Library because he graduated from Bronxville High. So we put all paintings that we could in my car, and the rest I think came from New York. And that was a big show and meant a lot to him. We drove to Cleveland so we could meet my mother. And Cleveland, big industrial town, once upon a time. So my mother just loved him. He took a lot of shots of the industrial section of Cleveland because he loved that. That is endless in Cleveland. So a lot of his paintings are some Cleveland shots. Then we came back and he started writing letters to my mother. And he wrote letters to my mother. He would keep copies of them. I have 44 letters that he wrote to my mother, who was in a nursing. I have this envelope at home that scrawled on the outside of the envelope says, the highlight of the year. The highlight of the year was meeting Bob. So in 2008, when he was in the hospital, it was right before the election. And of course, Bob was worried about getting his vote in before he passed. So we tried to get an absentee ballot, but we missed it by a few hours. Sorry, Bob. He used to watch Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And we just roared at that. We thought that was so funny. And so he picked up Larry David's phrase of stop and chats. And Bob would always walk up and down Congress Street, and because he knew so many people, and he'd run into them and they'd have a stop and chat. So every day at the end of the day, I'd get a call and he'd tell me about his stop and chats. We spent 4 summers from 2005 to 2008 at Capitol Island, which is off Southport. And 3 of the paintings here are paintings he did at that time. Arthur could see this. He made his own stationery. So this is a picture that he cut out of a magazine and put his head on it, and it's a desk pile with like 3 feet high of paper. And you write notes on it. So sometimes I use it to write notes. And we love to make cards for each other. Here's one of me on our anniversary. This man pouring champagne on. He's pouring champagne onto me. He forever he wrote me love notes. He loved to write everything, but he'd stop by my apartment. I would sometimes walk home for lunch from work, and he'd leave little notes like, Chip came over and picked up the painting, no fooling. And then he always had little hearts with us. Little hearts connected. Then I had a dahlia that I wasn't taking good care of. So he kidnapped it. And he wrote me a note. He said, your dahlia has been kidnapped. Rest assured that if you do nothing, your dahlia will be safe and unharmed. Speak of this to no one. Your dahlia depends on you. Don't try to make contact. You're watching your dahlia. Okay, these are just little samples of cards. We made cards for each other, and of course, I kept them all. You know, I mean, it doesn't take long to tell somebody you love them if you just have scissors and paste. Oh yeah, and then he'd bring me food from lunch places for me to have at night or the next day lunch. And he'd always write a little note. Gazpacho, you little devil. I've already forgotten the name of this, but it's very good. Like the biscuit goes under the chicken stew. Soup, day soup, Parmesan. I love you. Linda loves the video. You know, I mean, just little contact things like that all the day. And this, I'm going to, considering most people don't know that Bob wrote a book, something he really knew maybe nothing about, how to get into television.
He had never worked in television.
I worked in advertising marketing, and he told me about this, and I said, what do you know about this? But there it is. You can find it sometimes in a rare book or on eBay. Robert Spencer Solitaire. It's really a book.
That's how you know it's not really him, because he used Spencer and he hated that name.
I think I'm done. So that's what he was like. I was so lucky to have met him. I miss him.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I would like to I would like to say one thing before I introduce
This is a Zoom broadcast.
the lady
Yes.
who is going to be the facilitator.
Oh, really? Oh,
Of
no.
the rest of this program. But Dana talked about people meeting Bob on Congress Street and walking down and talking with him, and we did that a lot. I talked with Bob a lot, and everybody assumed that we talked about art. We never talked about art. All we talked about was that his dad was Jewish, and so was mine, and his mother was not, and so was mine. And what it was like to live in those two worlds and be brought up in those two worlds. At that time, it was the exception to the rule. Now, working at the Maine Jewish Museum, if I see two Gentile people coming in here, it's a miracle, and if I see two Jewish people coming in here, it's a miracle. So there's a lot more intermarriage now than there was then, and we had some really long conversations about that. But it's my pleasure to reintroduce Dawn Lauershaw, who is going to be the facilitator for the rest of this wonderful event. Here she is.
So, wow. After hearing all of this, my first thought is I am unworthy. But my second thought is how much this exhibit and these stories we heard align with the mission of the Maine Jewish Museum, which is to celebrate and honor the contributions and diversity of Maine's Jewish immigrants and residents in the context of American history. What we've heard about the contributions, and certainly in terms of diversity, I mean, what a character, right? So, you know, I just bear that in mind as you look at all of these stunning paintings that Bob made and what our mission is and how those paintings really help us realize that mission. Additionally, I'm just here to kind of take some questions for the panelists from the audience. Does anyone have anything that they are burning to know about Bob Solotaire, or a story they'd like to tell of their own about Bob Solotaire? Yes, sir.
I just have a question on when did his artistic interest start? And
I can take that. Early on, the first known painting that we still have, it's in my sister's house, was 1951. So he was born in 1930, 31, 30. Yeah, you should know that one. 1930. So yeah, so 21, right after college. He never got to. He went to Bard, where he met my mother and some other folks. So I don't know what he did. Oh, he has some. He has a scrapbook from high school of the founding of every article you could find about the founding of the UN, because it was back while that was happening. He kept clipping articles, and there were sketches in there of different people and different things going on at that time. So about then, so I would say, yeah, 1951. His first show, according to the list that I sent, was 1957. So I think he was also somewhat infamous or famous, maybe depending on your point of view, for my mother, when my brother was born, who's the oldest, coming into the hospital and telling my mother that he decided to give up journalism and becoming a painter, which is what every newborn mother with a newborn wants to hear. So yeah, early on, he dedicated himself to painting.
Yes, ma'am.
I've always wondered if he felt overshadowed by Stephen Etnier as a brother-in-law.
I think he soaked it all in. I think he just absorbed everything. I think they got along like brothers. They were extremely,
Don't forget to speak up.
extremely close. And I think Bob learned a lot from Stephen Etnier. I remember Bob's solo show at Baradoff Galleries was upstairs, and up walked Stephen Etnier. I'm thinking, oh, how fantastic. Here's the guy who started it all with Bob Solotaire.
Could you tell us what she's saying, because I can't.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
He and Stephen Etnier were extremely close, like brothers. And he really learned a lot from Stephen. He had a lot to tell Bob, and Bob, I'm sure, conveyed a lot to Stephen too. Anyway, they were very close. Always.
He admired greatly. We have one of Steve's sons here, David, in there, but he admired greatly Steve's use of light in the paintings, and he really wanted to sort of not to emulate that, but to learn from that. So I think that, as far as I know, they were good friends and respected each other. So
Well, I mean, I
Yeah,
guess
please.
I have, you outed me.
I did out you.
I think you hear me, trust me. So I am David Ednier, I am Steve's son and the youngest, just like, and is the youngest of Bob's children.
Yes.
I'm back to his adorable sister. My brother is on his way in. He's here, John is coming in, and his dear wife Nancy. Anyhow, so as relates to, hi, good to see you. As relates to Stephen and Bob, I mean, they thought the world of each other. Bob had nothing but admiration for, Dad had nothing but admiration for Bob's work. He purchased many of Bob's paintings over the years, as he did with other artists whose work he really appreciated, and artists he wanted to support fiscally and spiritually, I guess you might say. He was generous in that way, but that we have, as has been alluded to here, he wrote numerous letters. They wrote, certainly Bob wrote Steve letters. I don't know about the vice versa. I trust they're there somewhere. But it was delightful when they got together because they shared, I mean, when we used to get together often when we were all family and before divorces and those sorts of heinous things happened. And they would talk endlessly about light and subject matter and the shadow on a painting or any number of details. So I think the respect and love was mutual and shared.
I love when you didn't have to say those things.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Can someone discuss his training? So he goes to Bard. Does he study art at Bard? Where does he?
Actually, I don't know what he studied at Bard. English. He studied English. He studied English. We'll say on the record. He did not. He was mostly self-taught, right?
Yes, he was, absolutely.
He had a few classes at the Art Student League, I think, but no, he was mostly self-taught. Just day, like I said, day after day of painting for his whole life. So.
Other questions? I have a few that I wrote down that maybe will also inspire more questions from the audience. And this is as someone who really is just coming to know Bob Solotaire through this exhibit. So my first question for any of you is, how do you think growing up in New York and then spending his youth in that kind of busy urban landscape, right? Busiest imaginable, really. He called himself, I think, a Times Square or something like that. How did that impact the subject of his work and his fascination with urban landscapes?
The thing is, he loved both. He loved the urban landscape and he loved the countryside. He had so many aspects to his interest in art. And he just, he'd spent hours and days in New York in front of a storefront painting. And we come here to Maine and go take a trip outside, take a trip in the countryside. He was just very versatile, and he as the show shows.
And do you think he identified in the end more as a Mainer, more as a New Yorker?
I think both.
Blend?
I think both, definitely.
When we were Maine, he's a Mainer. When we're down there, he's a New York.
He often spoke about New York and his, his dad.
But was he a Yankees fan or a Red Sox fan?
I don't think he knew what they were.
Even
I
better.
don't think he knew what you feel.
So my next question, since we're here at the Maine Jewish Museum, and as Nancy was saying, Bob was the product of an intermarriage, which was unusual at the time. How did his Jewish roots impact either Bob the artist or Bob the man, or both, if at all?
I sort of flagged that question a little while ago. I've been thinking about that. It's a great question because we don't identify. He didn't identify as anything in particular. my mother was Episcopalian and he was Jewish, so I was raised, as we all were, sort of neutrally. But he did have he was definitely, I would say, culturally Jewish. You know, he recognized the heritage. He had Meshuggah. He said Meshuggah. He had terms that he used. He certainly had that background. More of I guess, a Jew of the mind and the heart, or the heart and the mind. I'm not sure which way it goes, but I do think there was something that occurred to me, was that part of what Judaism is studying the Torah and study and intellectual development, and you know
Arguing.
yeah, so and arguing, which he didn't like to argue, but he didn't study the Torah, but he put that same dedication into studying the world around him and to studying his craft. So while Jews will often, they look at the Torah, they study it, they want to deeply understand it. He applied that to the world, and I think that's probably from his Jewish heritage a little bit. So, and thank you, I'm glad.
Yes, Dana, just to add, I grew up in a very Jewish neighborhood, so when we went to Cleveland, we went to my favorite deli and ate Jewish food that I missed and he missed. And so it's interesting.
Yeah.
Connection. I loved my Jewish friends when I went to school. I was the only Gentile in the class. So I loved being around. I felt at home and comfortable with Jewish people.
So one more thought, and then I'm going to see if anyone has questions. Here we go.
I came in a little bit, but you're his son.
Yeah, I'm his youngest son. Yes.
And what's your name?
Benjamin.
He talked, I knew Bob in the 80s,
Awesome.
and he talked about his son, and he talked a lot about his father. It was very interesting. His father was what, a ticket broker?
The ticket broker, yes.
And he said, well, my father said this, my father would say that. And I think he had a very special relationship with his father. Can you illuminate that?
Yeah, I'm just curious, actually. I assume most people, but by a show of hands, how many people knew him personally here? Yeah, I figured. Well, thank you. I'm so glad that you all did it. Yeah, George Solotaire was quite a character. There's a picture of him out there. He was good friends with Joe DiMaggio and Walter Winchell. He was a Broadway ticket broker, had the Delphi tickets. And I just had a long conversation with a cousin on my father's side. I have cousins from my mother's side, but on the father's side, David Zaslow, who was a rabbi in Oregon. And that ticket business, he catered to the at that point the rich and infamous and famous. If you wanted a ticket to My Fair Lady on an hour before the show, you could go to him. You had to pay for it a lot. You had to pay like it was $150 extra. It was all cash, but he was famous. So Dad, definitely had a lot of respect for him. He hung out with Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe when they were together. He did ask Dad to. He had some heart problems when Dad was at Bard, and Dad said, "Oh, I can come down and help with the business if you want." And he was like, I think his senior year, and his dad said, "Yes, that'd be great." And he said, "Oh, I didn't really need that," but he did, so he never finished. But I think they had I don't know, Lynn, do you have any thoughts on what George and Dad's relationship? It was good, right? It was.
I think it was very close. It was stories.
Yeah. We talked about it a lot. We were just saying, actually, it was his grandmother that we never talked about much, but she was also she died before I was born. George died in 1965. But Margie was supposed to be really great too, as a mother and as a wife and a friend. So.
And Bob said he went to 50 Broadway plays. We counted them. This was all in the 50s, when the big musicals, the great plays were in New York City. He got tickets to see all of them. He made a list.
George was best man at Marilyn and Joe's wedding.
Wow,
He was the only person invited to walk with Joe at Marilyn's funeral.
Oh my God.
With George.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
I guess he was a Yankee fan.
He was. I don't know. That's true. That's true. I guess I backtracked. I'll have to backtrack on that answer.
That's why I like
George was certainly a Yankees fan.
Yes, sir.
I don't
know where this is coming from, but I have either a recall of hearsay, or maybe I can actually remember the event. Did Bob work at the Good Egg?
Yes,
Yes, you did, did you?
yes, he made muffins in the basement.
Maybe, what's in there?
Made muffins in the basement. And what, oh, here's a funny story.
What year?
Sorry,
What
what
year?
was the question?
I wonder what year that would have been.
81, 81.
It was really
Right.
great.
You should tell your funny story, but you have to stand up.
I don't know, like,
I'll hold it, I'll be the holder. You'll be the teller.
the funny Good Egg story is, I would get up at 3 in the morning and go make muffins in the basement at the Good Egg. So apparently one time he had cut himself and Bob with Band-Aids, so he had a Band-Aid on and he was making the muffins, and I don't know if he mixed it with his hands or what, but off went the muffins, and then he looked down and the Band-Aid was gone. Who knows where that Band-Aid? I can't.
Well, he struck me as enjoying lots of different scenes, situations, like working at the Good Egg. And I'm not sure how long he worked there, but he really seemed to enjoy it. And this was a different, kind of a different aspect. He was very open to many different things.
He was definitely open to many different things. He hated doing anything but painting. But when he did enjoy, yeah, he enjoyed that job. He taught painting every now and then. He had a few different things on and off. He ran that boarding house over on Brackett Street. I don't know if you remember that. And that was just that was a soap opera on itself. But yeah, as long as he could paint, he was happy doing it.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You implied that you did not live together, and I was wondering if it's not too personal to
No, it's a
share
great
that.
question. We lived about a 10-minute walk from each other. He would walk to my place most of the time. Neither one of us had a place that the other one could move into easily. And I've never been married, and I didn't know that I never really wanted somebody around all the time, to be honest. And the funny thing is, he would be talking to people that when I'm not there, and he'd say, "Oh, we've been together so many years," and it would come up that we didn't live together, and all the women thought that was great. And he'd say, "Why is that, Dana?" And I'd say, "Oh, I'll tell you later." So it just worked out, and I loved having him at my place. He's probably the only person that I didn't think, "Oh God, are they ever going to leave?"
Yeah.
I really loved having him there. We were independent, he could be in the bedroom reading Proust, and I'd be in the living room watching Survivor. and we were both happy. And then I hated when he left, really. And we did live together when we grew up in Blue Hill. But he's probably the only person that would never have mind if we had lived together, personally. That's a great question. Did somebody say that to you?
You did watch Who
No,
Wants
but
to
I
Be.
think it's great. So.
You did watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire together, didn't you? I remember him talking about that.
Oh, maybe. We might have.
Somebody texted me there's a question in the chat.
Oh, yes, we do have a question in the chat, actually.
Stop and chat.
Okay, we have a question for you, Ben. Ben, if no one's asked this, can you talk a little bit about your father's choice of subject matter? It seems like he painted the backside of cities and towns a lot.
Yeah, he did paint. That's a great question. He did paint he would go down dirt roads, he would go around buildings to find new ways to look at them, crawl over or climb over fences sometimes just to get to the right place. Obviously his industrial stuff was out of the ordinary. So he would search around, and I think what's also interesting about it, there's a quote, which I don't know if it's in any of this material. It'll be on his website, which will be live soon, a brand new website. But my most important tools are my sneakers. So he would just walk around and try to find new places to paint. And I think it's also important, if you don't know this by looking at the work, but if you get to see the real life subjects and what he paints, it's realistic and it looks like that, but it's always a little bit different. he knew that sometimes maybe a building didn't quite fit the composition or the color wasn't quite right. So he would change it or remove it, or he'll just make an alteration so that the integrity of the painting was what he was going after, and the feeling of what he was painting, not the realism of it. So and then of course being in Maine, he would walk the Blue Hill type of pictures and out down on the coastline, but he really loved the man-made structures and the physicality of them that he painted. So
Thank you, Ben. That was very insightful.
So just because of something you said, it triggered a question that I had as well, which is you just commented that what your dad was after was the feel rather than the realism, and yet he was a realist painter. And I'm wondering, did he ever experiment with Impressionism or any other style, given what you just said?
Well, thank God not with Impressionism. No, he did not. I guess he did some abstract things. He definitely did some like patterns and mobiles
Like
and
that big Ferris wheel, the Ferris wheel up there, that big round thing is so great.
oh yeah, that's almost an abstraction.
It is.
So he did play around, and he had a lot of different styles. You'll see we don't have any of them here, but some of the industrial from like West Virginia, Pennsylvania, very expressionistic and bright reds and dark, that are recognizable as factories, but they're emotional. The intensity of that's much more an expressionist than a realist.
About color, he once asked me, what did I think about the New York Times starting to use color in their photographs?
Oh, really?
And my response was, I guess if the Times is doing it, it has to be okay. And he brought it right into that.
Okay. That was a big shift.
Did he use photography at all?
Oh, constantly, yeah.
So how did he had a photography fit?
He would go and take pictures on site when it was, when he couldn't stay long or when the weather wasn't right, and then go back to the studio, right?
He took pictures all the time. He always had his camera. In fact, once we were coming back from my birthday, and there was a drug bust at the end of my driveway. And Bob sort of always carried a little instant camera if he didn't have his big camera with him. So of course he whipped out his camera and starts taking pictures of all the narcs and the arrest. And the narc, the guy who was arresting him, who was in plain clothes, came up to him and said, "I have to have your camera. I'm a narc and I can't have my picture out there." So I had a lot.
Right.
So he had to turn over his camera.
That was all pre-internet.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that I think one of the ways that abstraction turned up in Bob's paintings was that he might have done a bit of huge painting of a bridge, but then he would also take details from the bridge and frame it. I'm speaking from the heart because that's the one piece that I own, is the detail of a bridge, which doesn't look like a bridge to me. I mean, I know, I can tell myself it is, but to me, it's an abstraction. It's an abstract painting. It doesn't have to be a bridge.
Other questions or stories or anything anyone wants to say? Yes.
I have a question. Did he ever say to you, or Annette, how he wanted other people to interpret his paintings?
No.
No, I don't think he
No,
ever
never
did.
said that to me.
He said, "Don't look at it like a photograph." He hated when people said it looks like a photograph.
Yeah.
He didn't. Yeah, he wanted people to see them, but he didn't want to tell them how.
Because often people, especially it seems like curators, just go crazy. If something's red, they'll start saying, "Oh, this is like blood," or the artist wanted us to see blood everywhere. Just like,
Well,
I just
everybody
wonder-
interprets it the way they want to. If the artist isn't there, if the artist is dead, look at a painting and it's through their eyes, and who knows?
I think, I don't know, maybe think of this. He had a reputation in Portland for a little while I don't know where Nancy is, but of painting buildings that were then torn down. He did like, right, he did like maybe a half a dozen or so buildings that was like, oh my God, he's painting my building. I better
Kiss of death.
that's kiss of death. But at least he captured them before. But no.
There was one on our street that he painted and now it's gone.
Oh,
So do we need to add fortune teller to?
yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Other questions, stories, anything? Yes.
Did Bob ever keep track of, I'm not gonna say catalog, but keep track of where his paintings went? Whether it's private or public
I
or,
started. He did. I started.
Or you did it, right?
will something like that be on the website? It's great that you mentioned the
I don't have
website. So
I
is there a
have been-
website for his work?
Yeah, we had one up that my cousin John, who's also here, put up, but then I lost that site. But there'll be a new one coming up. It doesn't know. I'm also bad at keeping track of where they go. If anything sells from here, I'll have to like make sure we know what happens to it. But no, we don't. We know a lot of friends and things, people that have them, but we don't have like a detailed record. We were trying to figure out when a year one of the paintings out here was done, and we didn't even. That some of them are dated. Oops, sorry, online.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, we had a question right there. Sorry.
Ben, a question. Do you know how many paintings, I mean, roughly he might have produced?
Oh my God.
I know it's hard to look at.
1,000? Yeah, I don't know. From starting in 1951, I mean, we have 100 still. You have
Well,
a couple dozen.
No, I probably have, well, yeah, no, I probably have 50, well, I've got some hanging. But for sale, I don't.
He painted
7.
hundreds.
Oh,
Yeah.
tons, yeah. The inventory after he died
Was a mess.
was immense.
I know.
You have one.
And was there a change in style over the years? Did his style change or could it, or you can't tell from looking at a painting whether it was early or a late?
No, you just painted and painted and painted. That's when you're the real deal.
He wanted to get better and better. I think that was the only thing, and like experiment with new colors. But no, I would say he had a style pretty much early on and kept with it. I'm sorry, you have.
Yeah, maybe you can answer that. I think that he had brought up often, I think this is going to sell.
Oh, I think this is going to sell. Yeah. The kiss of death for painting.
I would like to hear that.
Oh, he would say that.
I was
Yeah.
always shocked, but gotta make a living.
I always said that whenever he tried to paint a painting that would sell, it was not as good as the other one.
Yeah, that's what you can't do. Yeah. Anyway.
I saw someone, yes.
You had mentioned that, I know people laugh that he paint buildings that were torn down. Do you know if he purposely did that with some to preserve them in his own way?
I don't think so. No, I think it was coincidental. It did happen, but I think he just loved the architecture here, and Portland was undergoing a big change in the 70s and 80s and 90s.
The tearing down stage.
Yes. Which is what New York does too. New York constantly tears down and rebuilds, and he painted there as much. The Twin Towers are out there.
Yes.
I'm sorry, another question. And what about his use of sketchbooks? Did that augment all of his paintings, or did he kind of work through an idea for painting, maybe doing a series of pencils or charcoals or something before he went to color? I'm curious.
I have one, but you have more, so why don't you answer?
But there's a couple you can look through out there that aren't, but as far as his main subjects, I mean, he would sketch mostly on the canvas and work it out on the canvas in pencil or charcoal and then paint. But his sketchbooks are endless picture, they're drawing, it's just him practicing, him doing stuff over figures, and they have their own beauty to them. But I think for paintings, it wasn't like he worked in a book and figured it out.
Well, the one thing I would add to what you're saying.
You might know.
I'm not arguing, but I view Bob as not only an excellent painter, I view him as a master draftsman.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
I'm delighted to possess a couple of his beautiful drawings. He didn't Portland ever show it, Baradoff. I see Rob here.
Yeah.
He was an amazing drawer, and he was, I don't think he was ever really recognized for not just his sketchbooks, which obviously must be of great interest, but he would reach a finished stage with a drawing, and they were masterful.
Yeah.
He used techniques that I've never seen anybody else use to achieve that. So I don't want to let that go.
Thank you,
unsighted.
thank you.
Other questions? I got one more, and then I'll let everyone break and enjoy all the wonderful refreshments we have prepared for you, as well as the beautiful artwork itself. So we talked about the influence of Stephen Etnier. Did Bob have any other mentors or artists who strongly influenced his work that you can think of?
What do you think?
Steve's gorgeous.
That's his Wyatt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's the artist on Steve's gravestone? Rockwell Kent. Yeah, Rockwell Kent. He always had a Rackstraw Downs. He always had an issue because he kept getting compared to Rackstraw
Yes, I
Downs,
know.
but which he thought he wasn't fair. But I think Wyatt, I mean, he just liked all art. I remember, not that it was a great influence, but we were at the Guggenheim in New York at a Picasso exhibit. And we were walking around looking at it, and the Guggenheim's a crazy museum, it's great. And he was talking about, he always asked, I said, oh, I like that. He's like, why do you like that? I'm like, "Oh, yeah." But it helped me, that's a good question, because then it makes you understand and you watch it. I remember we were talking about the Picasso, and he was talking about how interesting it was and why he did stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I felt like all of a sudden I understood Picasso in a way that was deeper than just looking at it. So I think he drew inspiration from everywhere. But I think certainly the Wyeths and Rockwells and some of the New England type things were crucial.
Last call for.
Well, I like to talk, so.
And I outed
This
you,
might
so.
be a good place to wrap it up. But we should all go on Bob's stories for as long as we all live. We all probably have them, but there's one that dear Laura's heard before. Bob was basically my second father, is how I viewed him. I was fortunate to have him. But, and I'd see him in Portland all the time. We'd go for walks, which I've seen more back in the day, as people say. But there was one time I was talking to him, and he said, you know, Dave, he says, people come up to me and they say, so Bob, you still painting? He says, Jesus Christ, that's what I do for a living. That's what I do.
That is a good way to end.
I just want to thank all of the panelists for taking their time, and I want to thank this terrific audience for your wonderful questions and your active participation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That is, I thought maybe if there were 15 or 20 people, it would be great. It was a hot day. But look, you all have so many things to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you.